Hello, this is Kelly Hammond, and welcome to the Resiliency Coach podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. The people who share their stories are here to tell you that you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they use in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Today's guest I'm going to be interviewing is my friend Olivia Hart, and she is a Utah native creative, conquering the world of business and marketing. So, Olivia, thank you so much for coming on my podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Could you please share your story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. That can be such a loaded question, I feel like, when people ask that. And it's one of my favorites because I love being able to share the uniqueness of, yourself and your life story. And like all of our truths are really gifted to us. And so it's something that, despite it being a really tough time that I had gone through, it has definitely curated the characteristics that I, have today and who I am today. And I'm very proud of that. To begin, a little backdrop, I was raised very conservative religious family, and I was LGBTQ. And so there was obviously some discontent at that point growing up. We were also a very poor and somewhat dysfunctional family, I would say. And there were a lot of struggles up into the teen years that just made it a really difficult time. Just all in general, I didn't have the easiest childhood, I guess that you could say. When I was 14, I was referred to as an abomination of God by a family member for being LGBTQ. I've actually ended up reconciling with my grandmother who had said that, but I don't think she remembers telling me that. Of course I do, because it was traumatic. The heart of just everything, the most godlike thing that you can do is just love and accept one another, despite all differences. That those differences are so valuable, and people can be so judgmental over them, and its differences are a gift. They are a blessing. Things got really rough at home. I experienced some abuse. There was a lot of discontent in my parents' marriage that made things just really ugly in the home. I was exposed to really big, scary emotions with a very minimal coping mechanism as a child. And so I learned a lot of pretty poor behaviors, and I witnessed a lot of things at a very young age that I probably shouldn't have. By the time I was 15 years old, we had been under investigation by DCFS for about 2.5 years. I had gotten, injured in the case of being abused, and they ended up, being like, hey, there's something going on here, and found out that we were just, not doing so well in our home. I ended with, on my mother's birthday, we went in for a routine visit, and they were just going to do a review and decided to last minute just pull custody from my parents and throw us into the foster care system. And so it was very sudden and very fast, but very necessary. And it was a very traumatic day. And so at that point, I spent about a year in foster care. I ended up coming back home at a later point. The family I went to was wonderful. They wanted to adopt my sister and I. My brother and I had gotten separated. He went elsewhere. And I love them to pieces. They were a huge influence on my life. And it was the first time I ever experienced any stability at all. And so I got straight A's. I was on my way to get my license. I was doing really well, but I missed home. I had someone that I was in love with as a teenager, teen love, gotta love it, that I wanted to get back to. And so we were given back to my father, and he and my mom had split, and he was not taking it so well. And I was very happy that they split nonetheless, because you shouldn't be with people just for the sake of the kids, in my personal opinion, because of, I'm a product of that. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm unpacking because of that. And going back home to him, he ended up, wanting to date around and got very distracted and wasn't as supportive as, where I had just come from. And my mother ended up taking us in, looking after us, and finally started to find some stability in my life. And she, didn't have custody at that point, but was still giving all of that support to us where it was needed. And I am starting to go through this period of time in my teenage years where, I'm rebellious, obviously with, troubled youth. I'm going through a lot of things. And between the ages of 12 and 22, I had experienced some significant losses. They really started to pick up around the teen years, but one had started with my best friend. I won't get into details on her passing, but it just continuously moved forward. And in that 10-year span, 12 to 22, there were 16 losses total. And it just was really difficult. My mother had always said that, you're my golden child, and you've never really given me any trouble, except for you just always pick friends that we end up losing, and it really hurts my heart because she would take those people in. And one of them was that partner that I was trying to get back to from foster care. I had come back, and she had passed away. We were on bad terms. And 3 months after that, my one of my best friends also took his life over the ordeal. 2011 was a pretty rough year. And so there were many instances like this. The partner's younger brother, 2 years after her passing, had also, we lost him as well. And so I still keep in contact with that family, the mother and the stepfather, very wonderful, strong people that I couldn't even imagine. And, that's not even my story to tell, but he was much like a brother to me. And that person was also my first love, the sister. And so there's a lot of turmoil that was taking place over this time. And there were a couple that were accidental. There was a lot of drug use that was taking place through the coping of like,
Right.
a majority of us were LGBTQ. But then there was a lot of accidents that took place at that point because all of us kind of had really bad lives. And as I'm moving through this, I finally have a harmonious home, which is the first thing that I ever was somewhat harmonious. Whose house is ever perfectly harmonious? But it was better than anything that I've experienced in my home. And my mother fell sick, and it was very, very quick, and it was very sad, and it took us by surprise. And I was in denial for a very long time it was a year, over the course of a year. And I didn't realize until about 2 weeks beforehand. And so we lost her. And I feel like thereafter, I really struggled to pick up those pieces because you're constantly looking for answers to the unknown. You're young, that's something that people will go through at a very later age in life. And we will all experience loss, and every loss in its own will be very different in how you experience that. And some of the 16 were very close people to me. So I felt lost. And I looked into a lot of spiritual things and trying to find that center and answers to things that no one will ever know. And I found some solace in Buddhism that carried me through a good portion of that. Definitely found some, ideas into reincarnation, something that really just vibed with me. And as it was very difficult to find a foundation of spirituality or what I could believe in because I didn't have that anymore. And I kind of felt like it was always forced upon me in some way. And so rebuilding it on my own took a significant amount of strength, but I also feel like I wouldn't have done that had I not gone through what I went through. So moving forward into just kind of like getting past all of that and just leaving the home after my mother had passed, there was more abuse that had taken place, and I just had to get out. I was making really bad decisions. I was making really bad choices that were detrimental, if not, life-threatening. And it actually became a very scary close call in regards to some of the bad habits I was forming, and I hid it from everybody and nobody knew. So on top of everything, I was now struggling with addiction, and I really had a hard time accepting that fact that it does run in my family. It's something that, can be very shameful. You become very ashamed that that's where you turn, but the grief became so overwhelming at that point. And eventually just moving myself from the environment of everything that was going on was the only choice that I had. Atop just like the abuse and everything that was taking place, I just had to restart my whole life. You have to change the friends that you're around. You have to change the people you live in your household with. You have to change everything you do every single day. And I didn't go to therapy throughout this entire journey. And I honestly don't know how I ended up so grounded or like kind of somewhat normal through all of that. I've obviously, like I mentioned, developed some really, hard behaviors to rewire in regards to my interpersonal relationships and just, with like loved ones from all of the like trauma that I endured at a young age. But nonetheless, like I came through the other side and have been able to continuously progress. I've been able to, really move and build a life that I appreciate and that I can value, that's not detrimental to my health. And so I've tried with schooling. I'm really fascinated with just like learning as much as you can about this life. I've taken everything that I've gone through as like a reminder, or like, a, a gentle nudge to be more grateful and have that gratitude. Just because these people that I loved so dearly didn't have the opportunity to make it past 20 years of age, a majority of them. And I did. And I sometimes don't think that's very fair, but I did. And I want to be able to live my life, not only enough for myself, but much more just in honor of these people that, don't have the opportunity to be here. So branching out into trying to, learn new things. The biggest thing that saved me through it all, to be completely honest, had been creativity. Therapy is obviously 1000% recommended, and I wish I would have done it. And I'm now venturing into that, 10 years down the road, just to still unpack it all, because it will take years to unpack it all. And so creativity was the biggest thing that was just kind of always there when everything else fell apart. And so I really got into music and art at a young age. I taught myself everything that I know until I got into college. And it was my way to have control over such a tumultuous life, and being able to create something from nothing, because it just felt very hard to make what I wanted to happen in life, or make the life that, I really wanted to live. Art was a great way for me to do that. Art was kind of just an escape, and was solace, and also a confidence boost. It really helped my self-esteem to be able to make something beautiful, and my life felt so much in despair, or, difficult or trying. And that's really what kind of just guided me through it. I've gotten to the point where I actually teach classes to at-risk youth and addiction retreat centers, to introduce that as a coping mechanism. And if it weren't for that coping mechanism, I honestly don't know where I would be today.
So thank you so much for being open. I'm glad that you speak with youth that are having the same problems, because they need somebody that's strong, that's been down the path, that knows the way, and that can guide them to a safe harbor. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
I want to be the cool lady that like I would have appreciated or needed at a young age. I want to be that influence. It's like, wow, this lady makes me feel so much better despite my like chaotic life. I strive for that with these young kids. It's just like, hey, you're going to get through it. You're going to turn into a rad,
Awesome.
cool, dread-headed lady like me too. We're going to be great. I almost actually didn't sign up because I feel like I haven't completely conquered it all. And it's still, obviously I can talk about it because I've processed it, but the healing path has been so constant and never ending for me. And that almost prevented me from like doing the podcast. And so in combination between, finding some sense of something to believe in, the spiritual aspect, whether it be the religious aspect, whatever it is for you, that alongside of being able to express my soul and myself into my art is literally what carried me through the darkest 2 decades of my life. Take your power back thing, that's a big one. Taking your power back over your trauma, that is make or break right there.
Great. What resources or tools did you use to healing? I heard you say religion, not necessarily organized religion, but faith, of a religious type of faith, as well as creativity and learning, going to college. Are there any other tools that you use?
In regards to the spiritual aspect, definitely like meditation was a big one, and just kind of practicing the self-awareness. And that was the biggest thing that I took from Buddhism when I was looking into it, which it can be much more of a lifestyle than an actual religion. Of course, there are the aspects that are definitely looking inward was a huge thing, and taking that, it all starts with the self-awareness and then taking that accountability. I think realizing that my trauma is not my fault, but it's my responsibility, and being aware of it. If you're not aware of your trauma and how it's affecting you, you can't really move forward. You can't really unpack it if you're not even, seeing how it's affecting your life. And so the self-awareness was a big one. And I try to stay on top of that as much as possible. The next step is, of course, moving into like accountability. And so that just comes automatically with that. It's like, okay, I see that this is happening. I need to be accountable for my actions and what I can control, in essence. In regards to the art, painting was just a godsend, because I appreciate surrounding myself in such lively, like beautiful colors. I believe in like color therapy. I think that it's very therapeutic and very helpful. So I like doing just like bright, brilliant pieces and having them just surrounding me all the time. I find it soothing in a way. And it is also a great reminder of just how vibrant life can be. And that, like that also has come from inside of me. And so like, I still can appreciate the vibrance of life instead of getting caught up in all the bad stuff, because let's be real, like anybody going through anything can go down that other path and become a victim to their circumstances, and we can't handle the cards we've been dealt, but like I'm going to play the hell out of what I've been given. And so trying to find those things that keep me on that side of the fence, anything that reminds me of the beauty, appreciation, and gratitude. Gratitude was a huge deal in overcoming that huge hump over getting through all of that, really. And if you can practice gratitude in all the small things, like, which can be very easy, and it's not like a huge resource that you have to go way out of your way to get, just a simple thing such as gratitude can be so helpful. Appreciating green grass, or a bright sunny day, or your ice cold water when you drink it, and that can pull you into your self-awareness. And so gratitude was a huge tool for me. And learning, I feel like I want to grasp so much from life. I also have been recently diagnosed with ADHD, and so I kind of bounce around quite a bit, and it is my way of coping. But I really want to have a deep understanding of the many facets of like human design and what we do and how we spend our time. And there's so much you can really do whatever you put your mind to. And that's a huge confidence boost to understand that you're capable. And that's hard to find when you're depressed, is understanding that you're capable, but you are. And the second that switch flips, you can literally design your life.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for being so vulnerable and telling your story and sharing the tools you've used. Now, there's another question I want to ask you. What's one piece of advice that you give somebody that's dealing with the things you've dealt with, that's right in the middle of that difficulty? What would you tell them if they were sitting right next to you?
Love yourself. Self-care. Like you've got to be able to give all the love that you have for everything back to yourself. And when you're going through so much hurt, let's be real, that hurt comes from a source of love. Like you lose somebody and you love them so much that like that hurt is a reminder of how great your love was for them. And so understand that you have that capacity to love immensely. We all are. That's just like, I feel like the code of the universe. In that love, I feel like if anyone were in my shoes, in my predicament, giving that to yourself is the first and foremost, utmost, like top priority. Because if you don't love yourself, you're never going to be able to push yourself through all the things that you go through. If you really love yourself, you'll be able to understand what is needed for self-care and what you can offer yourself, and it will help boost your confidence. It all starts with love, and it's easy to love everybody else except for you, especially when you get into a space where like things become really difficult, and it gets dark. But if you're able to love yourself through that, because love is so unconditional, then you can strive to come back over into a more loving space. You can definitely bring yourself back over into like a better homeostasis throughout everything and be able to grieve properly. Another one would be like patience. I feel like patience is a huge aspect, knowing that the grieving process is not linear. It doesn't just move forward. It's constant and it's erratic, and you never know when it's coming, and it could sneak up on you at any point. And so having that patience and love for yourself as you work through all the difficult times, those would be the two most important ingredients to get through anything remotely similar to that. That like, you're not just going to wake up and it's going to be normal or fine. It's going to take time, especially when you suffer significant loss. I'm 10 years down the road. My mother passed away, I think it was about 7 years. She passed away in 2015. And I'm just now getting into therapy. I've been able to carry myself this far and do pretty well, but understand the gravity in which like this kind of trauma, or any trauma, can really deeply root itself. And it's really hard to get out. It's got roots down into our soul, and it's heavy, and I highly advise being able to work with someone who does the type of therapeutic sessions that you need to help resolve that trauma and start your actual path to healing. Because this whole time, I haven't had a moment to really sit down and process with someone. I've been able to escape the situations in a way that, like, I'm safe now. I suppose a better way to phrase it is that when you're going through the trauma, you have to be removed from it for long enough to rest, to then conquer it, because you can be so exhausted and you won't realize it until you're actually safe for a period of time. And you're like, wow, it's the first time I've been safe in a long time, and now you can take all of that moving forward and have the strength to be able to conquer all of that.
Absolutely. The self-love, where do you get that? Or how do you get that? Where did you find it?
That's a great question, because it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and it's elusive, so it's very hard to find what ways in which you're needing love. And I think the biggest thing would be to look at the areas in which are broken, or perhaps like looking at your young inner self, your younger, self, your inner child, I think is an important place to look first. Because if you've suffered through trauma and have had this damage, I shouldn't say damage, because none of us are truly damaged. Okay. When you go through all of that, that's the person who had ended up the most hurt. There's many different versions of us within ourselves. And I think that that's the first one to look at, because that one's deeply rooted in the subconscious. And that one will tell you where you need to be loved, because a child needs to experience this, stable amount of love and affection and care growing up. And if it doesn't receive it, then that's the first thing that needs to be addressed. You need to be able to go love your inner child first. Elsewhere, I think it really varies upon your experiences and what you're looking for. Some people may experience body dysmorphia, like myself, and so being able to have that mind body connection and be able to increase my self-esteem and my self-confidence is just pausing and trying to rewire those negative thoughts when I notice them about my body. And that can apply across the board outside of having body dysmorphia. Any negative thoughts, it all kind of starts up here, and that's where you'll notice these negative thought patterns of, like, oh, well, I'll never be good enough. And if you hear it, which they can be quick and flying under the radar, we think so quickly. If you can take the time to really focus on your thoughts, you can stop it and replace it with something more positive. And that can actually rewire your brain. And at that point, you can end up, loving yourself more, because you're keeping good company in your head, in essence.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, and not just your story, but your resources and tools you've used. It's great advice. And the last question I have for you is, how can somebody get in contact with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anybody that, benefited from hearing the story and would like to connect and, discuss how I can be of more help, and help understand and see them and validate them. If you're going through something similar to someone else, like, that's why I find it super important to share stories and experiences, because you are a collection of all of the things that you've been through, good or bad. You're also a collection of the company you keep, etc. And when you kind of go through something and endure that and then find your way out the other side, then, that can really significantly help someone who can get lost in that and not have the tools or the resources to find their way through it. I'm definitely open to other people who have gone through experiences. I think we all have a deep, need for understanding one another. And so, yeah, if this really resonated, I'd absolutely be open to a conversation with someone. Awesome. So you can find me on Facebook under Olivia Hart, OliviaHart. My two middle names are Gwendolyn Helena, going to be really long to spell out. So when you see that, you'll see some hippie dreadheaded chick. And then under Instagram, my handle is olive_tree with 3 E's. So that'll be OLIVE_TREEE.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Olivia, for sharing your story with us today. Now, if you're looking for an alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.